and welcome back to another video of jPlay. I am Marcus and today I will walk you through some actual rounds of Three Kingdoms Redux, what you see here. And as you can see, the game board is really huge. So I'm living in Germany, that's why we are measuring everything in centimeters or meters. So the board is nearly 85 centimeters long, which is definitely quite a lot. And despite the relatively small package, it ships with a lot of cardboard tokens, cards and other bits and pieces, but I will come to that when I walk you through some actual rounds of this awesome game. Really, this is something I have to tell you in advance. I absolutely fell in love with this game, and today I will do my walkthrough a little bit differently. Normally I will try to put the walkthrough in one video, but I think this game deserves at least 2 videos. So I don't want to walk you through some actual rounds. There are already great videos by the designers on The Geek, which will basically put you behind all the rules. So again, I will only walk you through some actual rounds. And as I don't want to record an hour video or something like that, I think I will split that up in at least 2 videos so that I can show you at least most of the core mechanics of Three Kingdoms Redux. The game is designed for exactly 3 players. So one of the players will play the General Wu, second player will be Shu, and last but not least we have General Wei here, who is also played by one of the 3 players. The game board is designed to really accommodate those 3 players. So we have here Lord or General Shu, we have here the Wu player, and here at the bottom of the deck or of the game board we have the area for General Wei. Most of the action spaces which you see here are used by all of those players. Some are only used between 2 players, so here we have the border between the Wu and the Wei player, but I will explain the battle a little bit later. And last but not least we have some exclusive spaces or action spaces where only one particular player is allowed to, let's say, place their generals or their workers, if you want to call them that way. The game plays until 12 rounds are over, but there are certain other game-ending effects. For example, when one of the players reaches the Emperor level here, for example, it doesn't mean that this player automatically wins, but in some cases you are basically sure you are about to win. So in this case you might want to call it a day before another player is able to catch up with you. The game starts a little bit asymmetrically, let's put it that way. So we have General Wei, or the player Wei, at the top of the bidding track, so he will start all the bids as if in round 2, and you see that Wu and Shu are on 2nd and 3rd position, which is kind of good for those players because whoever is in 2nd and 3rd place on this bidding track forms some kind of alliance, and this is really a great way to, let's say, provide a catch-up mechanisms for players who are behind, because the player who acts as 3rd will be able to place the alliance marker on the board. I will also show that to you in a second what this means, but this gives, let's say, both of the players at 2nd and 3rd rank the opportunity to make sure that one of those action spaces is harder for the single player, for the leading player, to get let's say a winning bid on this one here. Really, as I mentioned, a pretty good catch-up mechanism. Awesome. The Wei player starts with 5 generals, so the generals are basically some kind of a workers. I think I explained that to you already, but he also only starts with 3 rice and 3 gold tokens. So again, we have here some kind of a balancing mechanism, whereas the Wu player plays with, or starts the game with, 4 generals, and Shu only has 3 generals at the start of the game. During rounds 3, 5 and 9 you see new draft mechanism. This is where all the players get new generals, and here also another catch-up mechanism is built into that, whereas the Wei player only gets 1 general as each of those rounds, as 3, 5 and 9. The Shu player, so the last one, gets 2 generals at round 3 and 5, and the Wu player also gets 2 generals and then only 1 as of round 5 and 9. But I hope I can demonstrate that to you how that will work during this walkthrough video. Another, let's say, balancing mechanisms are those separation and unification cards, where the Shu player starts with most of those, so he has some, let's say, way higher variety in what he tends to build during his turn. And of course, he also starts the game with the most rice and most golds, and also 2 of those popular support tokens, which I will also demonstrate you in a minute or so. How do the players get their starting generals? That's pretty easy. All the players have one lord. This is basically fixed. So here we have Cao Cao for the Wei player. Cao Cao is really an awesome general. I really think that this is some kind of a little bit too powerful, but again, I mentioned there are some pretty good catch-up mechanisms in the game here. And let's say the remainder of the generals here for the Wei player, he draws 6 cards and then he's able to choose 4 of them, and that's basically the same for the other players. So Shu player starts with Liu Bei as his lord, and then he also gets to draw 6 cards and is only allowed to keep 2 of them. And it's pretty much the same for the Wu player, who starts with Sun Hian as his lord, and then he also gets to draw 6 cards and is allowed to keep 3 of those. And I already did that in advance, and hopefully I can show you some of the special abilities of the generals, but I think I will explain their abilities as I play. As I showed you, I already drawn the separation and unification cards, and I think it's 3 unification cards and 1 separation card for the Wei player here. And the main difference between those 2 cards is that those separation cards usually provide you a way of getting additional victory points. I think that's the case. So let me check. Yeah, that's a separation card, but in this case, it's, let's say, an exception to the normal rule, and those unification cards provide you a way to gain additional resources and stuff, but normally they also come with a base victory point value here. Those separation cards in most cases have, let's say, a base victory point count that's on the top bottom right of each of those cards, and then you see a special victory condition here as a condition. For example, have at least occupy 2 border locations at 1 border basically, and then you gain whatever 1 or 2 additional victory points, stuff like that. But in this case, yeah, this is a pretty good fighting ability, because it says when you assign generals to a battle action space, each general's contribution to the bits total is increased by 1, and this is really awesome, especially for the Wei player. But right now he only has those cards on his hand, so there is an action space on the board here, which basically lets you build those state enhancement cards. And then it really doesn't matter if you build a unification card or a separation card, but this is really a space that in most cases is pretty crowded, and the players are really competing around this action space. And this makes the game really pretty unique, because you just don't place your workers or your generals and then say, let's do that action. No, this is a bidding mechanism. So all of those generals have a stat here, and then you can also assign more generals to that action space, but you're doing this in turns, and whoever wins a bid on an action space is allowed to take that action. This is really a great way to do things, and I really absolutely love it. I think I will lose 1 or 2 words on how you can actually win this game, as this is really absolute Euro style game. You really place your workers, you optimize your turns by considering where do I place my generals, where do I use my resources best. It's something all about victory points. For one, you get victory points for this military victory points track, and this is really something where you in most cases gain the most amount of victory points. Additionally, there are a lot of majorities which you are able to gain. For once, you can rank up here until you are the emperor, which is of course also one of the ways how to end this game, but this also gives you additional victory points. For once, you gain the victory points where you end your basically the game on. So if someone would be here on the Emperor track, he would gain 5 victory points, but he also gains a majority. So whoever is the, let's say, farthest to the right on this one gains an additional 5 victory points. If you share whatever one space like this, both of them, I think, get 3 victory points, and so on. Additionally, you get a majority victory points whoever has the most border locations under his control by the end of the game. And as I mentioned, this is, for example, the border location between the Wu and the Shu player, and whoever wins the most of those borders can claim himself the winner here. And then there's also another way to gain a majority, and I think this is also 5 victory points if you control both of those border locations. So let's say whatever Shu player has 3 here, 3 here, all the other players have 2 here and 2 there, for example, then Shu would have claimed 2 borders here, and then he would gain 5 additional victory points there. Then there is a majority on your home development area. For once you can develop your farms here, for example. You can just flip them on the other side and you can develop your marketplaces like this. And whoever has the most points here and one developed space is just 1 point, also gains 5 victory points, and the second 3 victory points. There are also some rules for ties, and you also get some victory points on how good you are with your tribal relations by the end of the game. This is, let's say, shown by this little symbol here. Again, you have some majority. You just count up your points which you have. So for example, if the blue player would be here, then he would have 11 points. You would also sum up those popular support tokens, and whoever has the highest point here also gets 5 victory points, but you also gain additional victory points that are printed here. So if you are basically the leader here and you also are on the 11th spot here, then the blue player would gain 8 additional victory points, which is definitely quite a lot. You can also gain bonus victory points by flipping those border location tokens here. This is something, hopefully I can also show that to you. It's not really much, but it can make a difference. And last but not least, you gain the victory points that are printed on your state enhancement cards, and some of those cards also show some additional victory points. But I already or nearly forgot that the player who holds this Han token here, so the Emperor Han, this is a current emperor, by the end of the game also gets 2 additional victory points. As you can see, there's really a lot going on. You have to consider so many things, and you also have to make sure that you don't let one player end the game too early. So if he is in the lead, and then he really might try to want to move up his rank here, for example, as fast as possible. This is really then something where you have to make sure that this particular player is not doing the control Han Emperor token. So this is the way how you increase your rank, basically. Then you would start to fight around this special action space and so on. So really, this is something where you really have to have a close eye on your opponents here. And all of the alliances, I think I mentioned them 1 or twice, are really very fragile, of course. Let's get started, and each round basically consists of 2 phases, or yeah, let's call it 3 phases. First of all, you have the confrontation phase where you place your generals in order to increase your bids, and then you see who will be allowed to take an action on the board. Then you have some kind of an action phase, then you will actually trigger your action space, and last but not least, you have some kind of an update and maintenance phase where a lot of things are going to happening, and then you will start into the next round accordingly. But I think I will explain everything now as I play, and I really hope I can do 1 full turn today, so then in my next video I can maybe do 2 or maybe even 3 more of those turns. So let's get started. And as I already mentioned, the way player always starts the bid as of round 1. But the first thing that will now happen is that the last player is now allowed to place the so-called alliance token on the board. And this is really something that can help the second and the third player in order to compete with the way player who has way more generals available, at least during round 1 and 2. They can place this token basically on all of those 12 action spaces, but not on those 2. This is definitely not allowed, and this would really break the game, at least especially here. This would be way too powerful, but all of the other tokens or spaces are really allowed, and I think it's always a good thing maybe to start with a construct state enhancement early in the game, so that we really can bring out some of your valuable resource cards into play. And this is really good for both Wu and Shu player, and I think this is what Shu player will do. And the last player is really encouraged to negotiate with the second player to really that they can maximize their forces against the overly powerful Wei player, at least during rounds 1 and 2. He asked the Wu player if he has also interesting construct state enhancement card at his hand, and I think they agree. Yeah, that seems like a good idea, but final word is really with the Shu player, so even if Wu is not satisfied, he's still the player to choose the action space, and yeah, I think they will do that accordingly. So this is now an action space where both of those players are placing their generals combined at this point in time. So the Wei player bids against both players unified, and this can be really tough at times to beat. But now the Wei player can start to place his first general in order to bid for an action space. And all of those generals have 3 stats basically. They have their administration value, they have a combat value, and they have a leadership value. And of course all of those generals have a special ability. This one is really powerful. He prevails in case of ties of totals during bidding. So he's basically the tiebreaker, whereas the other stats are important for his bid count wherever he would place those characters. Those spaces like train armies or recruit armies, for example, there your combat value is more important, and this is the weak spot of Cao Cao. So he will really focus on action spaces where the administration value is important. You also have to consider that those 2 action spaces have alternating requirements. So here in round 1, this is done really at random. The control Han Emperor token is being influenced by combat value, and the Win Popular Support action space is being basically adjusted or influenced by the administration value here, and this will then alternate as of round 2 and then back again. So as of round 2 it will be something like this, so they will always alternate accordingly. So I think Wei player will place Cao Cao here. So he starts his bid with 5 administration points at this point in time. Now it would go over to the Shu player, who can decide if you want to compete with the Wei player, and his administration value really sucks. So he has a 4, a 2, a 3 and a 3. So he already knows he has to place at least 2 generals, and he has to place at least 3 generals here, but he also knows that Wei player still has 4 more generals, so I think it's not really worth for him to do that. So instead he will place Sun Che here on the recruit army space, and the special ability of Sun Che says that he immediately gets a trained army when he takes the recruit army spaces. Normally you only get 2 untrained army, and then you have to train them accordingly. So once you can do that here, or by hiring an instructor down there, but that's really a good thing for the Wu player that he has Sun Che at his starting general. So I think for him that's fine. And then it's the Shu player, and he will play his general Pang Tong on the alliance action space, so he placed the alliance token there, so he has already 5 bits on that space. And his special ability says that he gets 1 piece of gold when Pang Tong is taking the alliance action space. Of course they first have to win, but if they win then the Shu player gets an additional gold coin, which is definitely not a bad thing. Then it's Wei again, and I think he will place Sang Liao on this one because he really needs resources. That's the problem with a Wei player. He only starts with 3 rice and 3 gold, and this can be pretty limiting, especially when you start extending your empire by taking over those border locations. So for each army unit you place here, you normally have to pay 1 rice and 1 gold, and this can really be something, especially as of round 6 or 7. Normally you really have 3, 4, 5 units on the board, and then you really need some gold and rice to feed your troops. Wu will place Chen Wu on the produce crossbow vessels action space, and his special ability says that he gets a bonus when he does either this action or that action here, which is kind of cool for him if he will be able to win it. And I guess the Shu player, that's tough. I think he will place his Su Kan general on this one. It doesn't really bring him something on this action space. He would gain additional popular support tokens, but right now he don't want to park any generals here, because whenever you are successfully doing this action here, you have to keep one of your generals for one turn on this action space. And especially for the Shu player who only starts the game with only 3 generals, this can be pretty limiting. But because he really wants to make sure that he wins this action space, he will also place 1 popular support token besides this general. So instead of only 4 points, he has now 5 points. He could bring the second one as well, but I think for now he feels fine, and he has some other plans for this remaining popular support token. So with this placement he feels okay. Even though Wei is quite broke, he decides to place one of his generals here to the control Han Emperor token, because this is really important for him. So he starts the game with 5 generals, so he can really easily spend those. And I think, let's see, I don't think it really doesn't matter. I think he will place this general here on this action space, and he feels pretty confident that he will be able to win it. Wu player also places a general on this alliance space, and this is really important. So if you want to do the action space for both alliance players, both of those players have to bid at least 1 general into this bid. So even though, for example, only green player would win this now, then if Wu wouldn't have a general here, he would not be allowed to take that action as well. But if both players of the alliance are present, then both players get to take the action here. And this is pretty tough for the Wei player, because combined they have now 9 votes, and there's no way that the Wei player can go there. So they are pretty confident, or they are pretty happy that they are able to do this action now. Then it's the last general of the Shu player already, and he will try to develop the marketplace here, and he will also place this popular support token on top of that. It really doesn't matter, because he checked the other generals. And this is something that is, let's say, a bit unclear in the rules. I think the rules say you keep your generals hidden from the other players, but really we felt that, especially when you're not that experienced with the game, it's okay if you play with open generals during the game. So in this case he knew what he was doing. He placed his general with a +1 value here. Normally you're saying at the start of the game, when you don't know the generals, you keep them face down, but as soon as you played them the first time, we decided to keep them face up. So he does not really 100% know what the other players have. And Liu Bei's special ability says that he's such a nice guy that he always gets one of those popular support tokens back when they return to the players. And normally those tokens are lost when you're using them. Wei will place Pang De on the same action space as Cao Cao. He's pretty sure that he will win this action space, but Pang De's special ability says loyalty. After Pang De wins an action space together with Cao Cao, and if then Wei did not take the improved tribal relations action that round, Wei's tribal relation level is increased by 1 or maintained at 12 instead. And this is pretty important, as your tribal relations tend to decrease if you are not trying to improve those tribal relations. So if you don't send any general here to this space, this tribal relation will move down 1 space at a round, and whatever, if you are here and then you would lose another space, you would gain a -3 victory point, a deficit token, and this is really something that you don't want to happen. So this is pretty okay for the Wei player, and I think the Wu player wants to have an additional popular support token, so he will place Sun Hian down there, the win popular support token. This is really kind of a bummer for the Wei player, because he's not able to be a match for this popular support space, as his administration value is only a 1. So I think he will place his remaining general here to the higher instructor and or import technology card. So for once he could now train his armies. This is something that he cannot do at this point in time, because he doesn't have any untrained armies. But you can also decide whether to take a separation or a unification card. Hopefully that's correct. Yeah, I think that's the case. And as he's only starting the game with 1 separation card, cards, he will go for a separation card. And this is what he drew. So if he will be able to build this state enhancement card, then he gains 1 victory points for that. That's already a good thing. Then there is a condition. So have it constructed at most 2 state enhancements. So this is something you have to play early in the game. And then you have some additional victory points condition down there. At the end of the game, you earn 2 victory points if you have constructed the most number of state enhancement, or 1 victory points if you tie for the most number. So this gives you really a great way to align your strategy early in the game. So in this case, he really wants to focus on state enhancement cards because he could gain additional 2 victory points for those. And this is really can be game changing for him. But first of all, he has to take his card on his hand, of course. So now all of the players have placed their general, so it's now time to see who won the most bit. There's no competition on the board. This is quite seldom, but maybe at the start of the game you tend to optimize your turns, and in this case also the alliance players, let's say, played a good piece, and also the generals were balanced pretty good, I guess. So all of the players can take their actions accordingly. So we have now 1, 2, 3, 4 bits that the blue player did win, so this is definitely important. You also have 1, 2, 3, 4 spaces for the red player, so there is now a tie, and this is now important for the bidding order of the next round. So the first thing that would happen is we would now align the action order to the current bidding order, and then according to the amount of bids that each players have won, you would then realign those bidding track. But in this case this will not change because Wei and Wu are both on a tie in respect to their bids. And then the first tiebreaker are the victory point tokens, or military victory points, and this is also tied. And then you have a second tiebreaker, and this is according to the ranks of the general, and in this case Wei player will break this tie, so he will stay on top of the bidding track. So everything now is on track for the next round, and then according to the action order track all the players will now take their actions. So in this case Wei player will start with all of his actions, but he can choose the order of those actions accordingly. And I think the first thing that he will do, and I was too quick. Sorry, I already took this action here. This is of course not allowed. I was completely confused. So now would be the time to take this card here, but I was already finished, so really doesn't really make a difference here. Apologies for that. So he already took this action, so this general will just go back to the player basically. Then he will take the develop farm or harvest action space. He won this one, and then we have to look for the special ability of Pang De. He just won the action space together with Cao Cao. He did not take the improved tribal relations action this round, so his tribal relation is increased accordingly, which is definitely a good thing. Now let's take the action, and theoretically he could now decide whether to develop a farm or to harvest. At the start of the game no one has developed farms, so the first thing that you have to do is you have to develop your farm accordingly, and then as of round 2 he would be allowed to harvest, and this then provides you, or put it in your granary, which will help you to deal with the upkeep costs of your troop in the later turns, which is quite important. But for once he has already got 1 point here on the home development area, so which could bring him 5 additional victory points by gaining the majority here. The next thing is he will demand the tribute here, and I think he will vote for both. So he will take 1 gold and 1 rice. So 1 and 1, and he already has to pay 1 gold for the control Han Emperor action. So for once you have to pay 1 gold, it's stated here, and then you have to choose 1 general that has to stay on the board. So we'll normally flip it to indicate that this is the token that he has won, and then by the end of the round he would then get the Han Emperor token, which can be worth 2 victory points if you can hold it at the final round basically, but it also provides you a +1 on one of your bits. But the more important part of this action is that he just got promoted to Grand General, so he would gain 1 additional victory point for this space, that's for sure. And if he would lead that track by the end of the game, he would also gain 5 additional victory points, which can be quite important as well. These were all the actions for the Wei player. Now let's deal with the Wu player, and the first thing is he will just take his popular support token from there, so this can be definitely useful. Then he will deal with Sun Che here. There he gets normally 2 untrained army as it's printed here, but because of his special ability he gets 1 trained army instead. And you can see that this is more like a peasant army here, where you see here a sword, real helmet and a buckler. At this action space you can decide whether to take 2 crossbows, 2 vessels, or 1 crossbow and 1 vessel, and I think he will take 1 vessels here. And because of Chen Wu's special ability, he just took the produce spears horses action, so he has now to take a spear or a horse, which is definitely a cool thing for him, and I think he will take an additional spear. That's definitely good for him. And last but not least, he will deal with the alliance space here, so they have both won it in their alliance, so they can both take this action here. So he's now allowed to build or construct 1 state enhancement card. This is really exactly 1 state enhancement card, and he decides to build or construct the bronze coinage, which costs him 1 gold and 1 rice. It provides him 1 victory point by the end of the game, and whenever he takes a trade, rice and or weapons action or hire instructor, then he receives 1 gold before taking either action. This is cool. If he takes both of those actions, he can get 2 pieces of gold in 1 round. This can be really important, so this was definitely a good turn for the Wu player. And then we deal with the generals of the Shu player, and I think he will start with a develop marketplace or collect tax. That works pretty much the same as the farm down there. So at the start of the game, all of those marketplaces are undeveloped, so you will flip those accordingly. This was also grant 1, let's say, point for the final majority. And if you move those up to your treasury, then you can able to save some of your bucks for the upkeep of your armies. That's definitely something that's important. And additionally, he gets this popular support token back because he was accompanied by this fine guy, Liu Bei. Next, he will conduct his construct state enhancement card, and here we will choose the hereditary army system. After you take the produce spears horse actions or produce blah blah blah, you receive 1 trained army or untrained army. This is awesome. For once it's 1 victory point. He has to pay 1 popular support token, which he got back because of Liu Bei's awesome special ability. And now it's really important to mention the order in which you take the action, because if he would have taken the order of this produce horses before he would build the state enhancement, he wouldn't have gained the bonus of his state enhancement card he just built, which is of course awesome. And I think in this case he decides to build 2 spears, and because of his new state enhancement card he also gets an untrained army for that as well, which is absolutely awesome. Unfortunately, he's not allowed to keep this popular support token for now, but that's okay for him, I guess. Now that all players have taken their action, you check if some of the players did not take the improved tribal relation action. That's not the case for the Wei player here because of Pang Dei's special ability, so he basically took care about his tribal relations, but all the other players did not do that, so Shu and Wu basically reduce their number of tribal relations accordingly. Right now that's not really a problem as they're starting the game higher than the Wei player, but this is definitely something they would have to keep in mind. Then it's time to get some end of round benefits from your generals, and here Sang Liao, or the Wei player, is really happy because he has no untrained army in his supply, so he gets 1 trained army just like that. Isn't that awesome? And he also gets 1 weapon of his choice because he also has no weapon, which is also quite cool. And I think he will decide to take a horse or cavalry weapon in this case. And then we come to the update and maintenance phase. So first thing is we will flip those criterion markers. I explained that to you. So as of the next round, to control the Han Emperor, you have to deal with administration value. Then it's time to pass the Han Emperor token accordingly. If someone has taken it, if you had it and you don't took the control Han Emperor action space, then you would return it to the supply. In this case, the Vey player has gained this token, so his bidding power increased a little bit more. That's really some kind of a problem for the two alliance players right now. Then you have to pay for your popular support tokens, or you have to feed them, and each two of them gets one rice unit. If you would only have one, then it's rounded down, so you have to feed them at all. In this case, he has two of those tokens, so he has to get rid of one rice token right now. That's also not really a problem for him. Then each player would have to feed their armies if they would have stationed some of them. Right now, that's not the case. Now the players would also gain military victory points for each of their stationed armies. That's also not the case, so they don't get any additional victory points from that. And this is really important to mention. So if you place your armies early in those provinces here, they would gain you each a victory point each round, basically. So really an army here at the very first round in Chanbang Po, for example, could gain 12 victory points until the end of the game if you play until 12 rounds are over. And if you place 2 army units here, that would even double. But you also have to feed them accordingly, of course. But nevertheless, this is really a great way to gain victory points early in the game. And the last thing that would happen, you would update the round track accordingly. Right now we have a normal round, but as of round 3, then we would see another draft mechanism taken over, so you get new generals for each of the players. And now, according to the bid order, we would start again with the bids, but first of all, the last player at the bidding track here would have to place the alliance token, because this is something that has to move, so it cannot stay here on this action space. It always have to move around the board. But I think this is really something I will take care of as of the next episode of my walkthrough series here. I really hope this very first round of Three Kingdoms Deluxe gave you some insight about an awesome game. I really cannot mention that too often, how much I like this game, and I'm really thankful that I've gotten the opportunity to conduct a little walkthrough video for this game here. If you want to see more, and I hope during rounds 2 and 3 I can show you how the battle is being conducted, then subscribe to my channel, as I will definitely record at least one additional video, and then we'll show you some more of the core mechanics of Three Kingdoms Redux. And until then, hope to see you soon. Bye bye.